So good afternoon to everyone here listening in today. My name is Arul, and thanks for joining us in our webinar today. So today, I'm going to speak to you, I'm going to share on understanding the definition of wages, right? So this is our third series, and we have got another webinar next week. So we hope this series of webinars helps you to better understand some of the provisions of Employment Act, whether it's wages, whether it's performance, whether it's termination, whether it's dismissal, etc. So, keep your questions coming. So I hope you will stay till the end of this webinar. I've got a special offer for you, so listen till the end. We will end roughly about 4:30 p.m. today. For those of you all who are new listening in, I hope you have joined the HR forum. In fact, if you're seeing me right now, I'm sure you have joined the HR forum because you're live on FB, right? But I would urge you to get your subordinates. If you're a HOD, if you're a section head, what is the best way to train your employees? What is the best way to train your line managers? What is the best way to train your subordinates, your junior HR employees? The best way, or one of the best method, which is free, is to get them to join the forum, participate in webinars like what we're having today, discussions, documentations, templates. So I would advise you to get all your members in your team to join the HR forum and make themselves avail to documentations, policies, templates, tools, webinars like what we're having today. And there's many more coming, right? So hope to get, most of your members in the forum. So, just a very quick overview of myself. My name is Arul. I think many of you all do know me. I have got over 22 years of experience in human resources, also in a little bit in other industries. I've been in semiconductor industry, I've been in glove manufacturer, I've been training, education, transport, and so on. And, so today I'm going to share with you on wages. And these are, based on my experience over the last many years being a HR practitioner. And so before I go into my topic, proper, I would just like to repeat, share with you this particular slide. I think many of you have seen it. And I would encourage every HR practitioner, whoever, listening in today, when you are making a presentation, when you're presenting a proposal or a framework, or you're doing a town hall session to your management, to your team members, to your subordinates, it doesn't matter what is it, I would urge you to use a copy of this slide, right? Make this as one of your main slides. So the message here is, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So what it says is this: when we follow the law, right? For example, when we talk about wages, do we include meal allowance into the ORP calculation? Do we include attendance allowance into ORP calculation? Are we paying employees correctly? Now, sometimes we try to manipulate, right? We try to keep costs low by not paying. We try to find creative ways how to avoid paying employees, right? Now, we think it's cheap. We think we're trying to reduce costs. We think it's cheap. But what this statement says, when we comply, it is much more cheaper than when we don't comply. So let me give you a very simple example, right? Which I think you and I, we are both guilty of. Let's say today, at this moment, it's 9 o'clock. It is 9 o'clock morning at this moment. And we want to go and grab a quick cup of teh tarik or nasi lemak in one of the, kedai mamak. So what we do, we park the car on the roadside, and we decide to, we say that I think at this hour, I think the majlis guy, he's having his breakfast. So why not we just quickly make a quick dash, grab a cup of coffee, nasi lemak, we come back. So we rush to the, we make a quick dash into the restaurant, quickly have our meal, we come back to our car, we realize there's a summon, right? Now, if we were compliant, the cost of, a half an hour car park, parking your car, probably 60 cents, 30 cents to 60 cents or 40 cents. But because we were not compliant, now we got to pay 30 ringgit, 20 ringgit, 10 ringgit, or 50 ringgit, depending on how much your town council, puts on the ticket, right? So the cost of compliance, it is always cheaper than the cost of non-compliance. Similarly, when we try to maneuver the process, when we try to maneuver the law, we try to circumvent the law, thinking that we can avoid this, paying this particular, using this formula. Now, when we are hit, right? So always, take note of this. Compliance is cheaper. So when we are compliant to the law, it is cheaper. Now, if you think compliance is expensive, why should we include this ORP? Why should we do that? It's costly. Now, you try non-compliance. Non-compliance is always more expensive, right? So I hope you can make use of these slides. So at the end of the webinar, we're going to share these slides with you. Those of you all who signed up through email, you'll get a copy via email. Otherwise, you can also download this from Facebook and put this as your first page in your next presentation. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to examine the definition of wages, right? So when we say wages, I think many of you all would have seen the Employment Act definition, but we must note that Employment Act 1955, they have their definition of wages. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, EPF, they also have their definition of wages. Of course, you can see it's quite identical, right? So I've put side by side to compare. And when you look at Employment Insurance Systems Act, it also have their own definition of wages. And when you look at SOCSO also have their definition of wages. So because all of these acts are independent, right? So Employment Act is by Labour Department, SOCSO is by Perkeso, ES is by Perkeso, EPF is by EPF. So these are 4 different acts. But of course, what you can see, the definition of wages are quite similar in all these 4 acts. So our focus today is Employment Act. So we will not cover on EPF or SOCSO or EIS. So today's webinar is very much on Employment Act. So what does it say here? Wages is a broad term. Wages means basic wages. Basic wages means basic salary, right? So wages means basic wages and all other payments in cash. So the key word here is all other payments in cash for work done. However, this does not include the items A, B, C, D, E, F. So when we say wages, which is basic wages, which is basic salary, and all other payments in cash for work done. So when you pay an employee in cash via the salary, that is called cash, that is part of wages. Now, what is not wages? The value of a house accommodation. If you provide them a house or you supply them food, physical food, now that value is not included in wages. But if you pay them in cash into their salary, that is wages. So for example, a very a common ones, I think many of you all may always have this question. Meal allowance, is it part of wages or not part of wages? So the answer is very simple. If you look at A, if you are supplying food, then it is not part of wages. But here, you're not supplying food. You're giving them payment in cash for that particular food or for the food. So meal allowance is part of wages. B is if the employer, which is you are paying for pension fund, provident fund, for example, EPF, or there's a termination, retrenchment benefit. So all these are not included. C, any traveling allowance or the value of any traveling concession. So if your employee has traveled to a particular location and they put up a claim, and this allowance you pay them to reimburse the claim that they've traveled, the travel they have performed, that is not included. Or if there's any expenses the employee has incurred for his job and you pay him for that, that is not wages, right? Gratuity payment or retirement payment or any annual bonus. So item A, B, C, D, E, F, it is not wages, right? So now if you would ask me, what about car allowance? What about mobile allowance? What about broadband allowance? Or what about hardship allowance? What about uniform allowance? What about, let's say, standby allowance? Do I need to include in wages? The answer is very simple. If any of these allowances that you pay, it is not A, not B, not C, not D, not E, not F, then it has got to be part of wages. So I call A, B, C, D, E, F, these 6 items, I call it as exclusion. So if any allowances that you pay, it's covered in this exclusion, then it is not wages. But if any of these allowances, it doesn't matter whether it's allowance, incentive, whatever label you call it, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we may have different name. So it doesn't matter what you call it, incentive, commission, allowance, token, it doesn't matter what you call it. As long as you're giving them in cash, right? And it is not A, B, C, D, E, F, it is part of wages, right? So that's one way to look at it. And so when you get this slide, please compare EA, EPF, what are the similarity? Is there any difference? Almost everything is quite similar, except that EPF has their own act. So I just run through EPF very quickly. So when we look at EPF, under EPF's act, wages doesn't include service charge. it doesn't include overtime payment. In other words, when you pay EPF, you don't pay EPF on overtime, gratuity, retirement benefit, right? The reason why I highlighted traveling allowance, now there's a difference between traveling allowance and a transport allowance, which I'll cover in a very short while. So read these slides when you get it, so you can see a good comparison. Now, so we have already covered, what is wages. So wages covers two aspects, which is basic wages, which is basic salary, and the second is payments in cash for work done. Okay, so now we have done that. So my question to you is, how do we determine who qualifies for overtime, right? Who qualifies for public holiday pay? Who qualifies for a rest day pay? Who qualifies for termination benefit? Now, those of you all, if you have gone through, trainings, or if you're very familiar now, the amendment that has been made to first schedule, the first schedule says this, all employees, irrespective of wages, doesn't matter what you're earning, if you have a contract of service, you are now covered under Employment Act. So I think we all know that. But how do I determine, I'm sure you all recall, employees earning up to 4,000, they are eligible for overtime, right? The overtime provision covers them. But if you're earning 5,000 or 6,000 and you're not a manual worker, you're not supervising manual workers, you are not eligible for overtime. So let's look at those employees who are earning below 4, or those lorry drivers, who are manual workers, irrespective of their salary. So in order to determine what is 4,000, right? Remember we said wages up to 4 and wages above 4. So in order to determine that, we first need to look at the definition of wages in first schedule, which is on the right-hand side, the orange box. So for the purpose of this schedule, which is to determine what is 4,000, we need to look at wages defined in section 2, which is on the left-hand side, but it does not include any payment, by way of commission. So commissions are not included, subsistence allowance are not included, and overtime payments are not included, right? So in other words, to determine what is 4,000, you look at definition in section 2, which is on the left. So what is not included is commission, subsistence allowance, overtime payment, apart on top of whatever that you see on the left-hand side box. So I know sometimes it can be confusing, especially if you're new looking at this for the very first time, and so on. So what I've done is I've merged these two, right? So I've merged both the boxes to give you a much more clearer picture. How do you determine 4,000? What are the components to determine 4,000? So when we merge, it shows this, right? So in order to determine what is 4,000, you only take the first item, which is basic wages, and all other payments in cash for work done, right? That is part of it, but it doesn't include all the items below, right? It doesn't include value of any house. It doesn't include, payment to pension fund or provident fund. It doesn't include traveling allowance. It doesn't include any payments that you pay to the employee to defray. That means to offset their expenses because of their employment. Because of the employment, they incurred expenses. So you pay them something to offset, to defray that. That is not part of wages. No gratuity, annual bonus, no. Commission, no. Subsistence allowance, no. Overtime, no. So all these items are excluded. So in order to determine the 4,000 mark, you only take the first part, which is basic wages, and all other payments in cash for work done. So let me give you a bit of illustration, right? Let me give you a bit of illustration. But before that, so what exactly is subsistence allowance? Now, if you go back to the definition, right? So you can see here, right? You can see here, let me see, where is that? Here, you can see here, under the definition of wages, right? You look at the orange box, it says that wages in first schedule, the definition, it is defined as section 2, but it doesn't include commission, subsistence allowance, and overtime payment. So what exactly is subsistence allowance? So the definition of subsistence allowance, I'm going to read to you again. So now this is from dictionary.com. Any money that is given to an employee to buy food, clothing, pay for any other necessities while awaiting for the first pay. Or it can also be construed as money that is paid to a worker on top of his salary. Salary, different story, put salary apart, which is used to cover expenses that he or she may incur in the performance of the job. So as a salesperson, assume I'm a salesperson, I need to go somewhere, I need to buy someone lunch, right? Because I need to entertain, potential customers. So I had to buy lunch. Now, that lunch is not for me because I need to buy to, as part of my job. So I come back to the office, I claim this money back. Now, that could also fall under subsistence allowance. So do seek guidance, what exactly is the subsistence allowance? So in other words, right, in a very layman term, in a very basic plain language, if whatever you pay to the employee, if it's an expense, you take it out. If it's not an expense, it has got to be an income, right? So usually for me, my rule of thumb is, if anyone asks me, these allowances should be part of wages or not, my first question to them is this an income or expense? If you're paying them this allowance because they've already incurred a cost, it is excluded, right? If not, it is included. So that is a little bit on subsistence allowance. Now, what is the difference between transport allowance and traveling allowance, right? Remember just now, traveling allowance is excluded, whereas transport allowance is included. So what is the difference between traveling and transport? So which one should we consider as wages, right? So let me go back again in case, some of you all, if you're new, let's go back again. Now it says here, if you look at the box on the left-hand side, under EA definition, wages means basic wages and all other payments in cash paid to an employee for work done, but does not include A, B, C, D, E, F. Look at item C. Traveling allowance is not included, or value of any traveling concession, that is not included. So now let's go back to this slide. So traveling is not included, right? Clear? So if you see on the right-hand side, traveling is not included. But the Act is very silent on transport, right? So of course, if you ask me, should I include transport allowance into ORP? Answer is yes. Is it part of wages? Yes. So in other words, traveling is considered an expense. So expense, you exclude it. I hope you got this, right? So transport is included, traveling is excluded. Because why? Traveling, I've already traveled, you go to a business trip, you pay for your toll and petrol, you come back to the office, you claim. And when the company pays you, it is not an income for you. You're not gaining anything out of it. Because why? You've already paid the plus highway, you have paid, you purchase fuel. So that is an expense you've incurred. But transport allowance is given to you rain or shine, right? So transport is included, traveling allowance is excluded. Sorry, why am I confusing you? Traveling is excluded, right? Traveling is excluded, transport is included. So I hope you got it right. Now, if you're still confused, right? If you're still very unsure, this 4,000. So in order to determine 4,000, you need to look at wages in first schedule and the wages in second schedule, you combine it, right? Now, this is the first step to determine whether this person is eligible for overtime or not. Now, once you have already determined, let's say now I've got an employee and his name is Fadzul, right? I'm paying him, the salary we're paying him is 3,500, right? And 3,500, and we also pay him an allowance of 500. So his wages today is 3,500 plus 500, ngam 4,000, right? But I also give him, right? I also give him, let's say, let me see, what do I give him? I also give him commission of another 1,000. So if I include all, 3,500 plus 5 plus 1,000 is 5,000. Is he part of Employment Act? Is he, would he qualify for overtime? Answer is yes. Why? Because commission, we do not include to determine the 4,000, right? So that's how you look at it. So once we have already determined whether this employee is eligible for overtime or he does not eligible for overtime. So once you have determined that, now to calculate ORP on a monthly basis, for overtime, you only look at wages as defined in section 2. So if you just get this right, it'll be much more easier. So let me give you a little bit illustration. What is that 4,000? So remember, wages up to 4,000, they will be eligible for overtime. Wages below 4,000, they will not be eligible for overtime. So illustration number 1, this employee, basic salary 4,000, no allowances, no commission, no overtime. So total wages 4,000. Would he eligible for overtime? Answer is yes. Illustration number 2, basic salary 2,500, allowances 1,200. So allowances has got to be in, but overtime no. So we do not include overtime to determine the 4,000. Therefore, this employee is part of, he or she would qualify for OT. Same goes to illustration number 3. Basic allowances 3,008, allowances 15, commission 200. But we know that commission, we do not include commission in order to determine 4,000. So the total wages is 3,950. So answer is yes as well. This particular employee, illustration number 3, do qualify for overtime. What about illustration number 4? Basic salary 38, allowances 300. So when you plus these two, is 4,001. It is above 4,000. So employee number 4 would not qualify for overtime. So that's how you look at, to determine. Now, once we have done this exercise, so we know that employee number 1, 2, 3 would qualify for OT, and employee number 4 would not qualify for OT. So what do we do on a monthly basis? If employee number 1, number 2, number 3 works overtime, they are eligible for overtime payment. Employee number 4, no. So the first exercise, let me repeat back again the slide. In order to determine wages up to 4,000 or above 4, first step is to combine, look at both wages definition. And once you've done that, for the normal calculation of ORP, you look at definition in section 2 only. And so this is just this is a quick slide. I wanted to share this with you. I need to thank Mr. Toh Siew Pat. So if he's listening in today, now I got this idea, from him when we did the webinar on minimum wage. So a nice way to illustrate, if you're to the minimum wage today is 1,500. So if an employee is employed on a monthly basis, they get 1,500. If they're on daily basis, if they're working 6 hours per day, the wages per day is 57 ringgit 69 cents. If they're working 5 days, it's 69.23. If they're working 4 days, it's 86.53. Some of you may be applying the daily daily rate concept to pay your employees. Those of you who are paying your workers on hourly basis, then their hourly rate would be 7.69, right? So how do you determine this figure? The formula is at the bottom. So when you get this slide, please look at it. Now, this is based on 45 hours, which is the recent amendment that has been made. Now, how do you compute hourly rate of pay and ordinary rate of pay? Most of the time, we know this as ORP. So ORP and HRP almost looks identical. So what is ORP? You take the monthly wages or monthly rate of pay, which is wages. So if you look at the bottom remarks, monthly rate of pay is wages defined in section 2. So remember the first exercise we did just now, when we combine first the definition in first schedule and definition in section 2, we read it together to determine who qualifies for overtime. Now, once you have done that, you put that aside. In order to calculate ORP, which you're going to use for overtime calculation, we only take definition in section 2, right? So monthly rate of pay divide 26, that is ORP. Then you divide normal hours of work, which is to determine the 1 hour pay. So ORP is 1 day. HRP or hourly rate of pay is per hour. The formula that we are very used to or that we are accustomed with is a combined formula, wages, right? Divide 26, divide 8. So if the average assumption, if on daily basis the employee is working 8 hours, you divide 8. If on daily basis the employee is working 7.5, you divide 7.5. And so some of you all may not know this, right? In section 60IA, it says this, when we calculate ORP, right, we use wages defined in section 2, whether we are paying the employees on monthly basis, weekly, daily, hourly, piece rated, or any other mechanism, right? So when we calculate ORP does not include any approved incentive. Now, this incentive is not what you pay your employees, no. An incentive payment that is approved by the Labour Department, or if an employee works on rest day or a public holiday, you do not need to include ORP. So this is what section 60I says. But I'm sure some of you all would agree, you are just paying it. Am I right? Anyone? That means when you calculate ORP, you do not exclude the work done on rest day and the work done on public holiday. Anyone? Yes, no? So I'm sure many of you all, you just pay, you just pay all. Now, if you're paying all, are you doing it right or wrong? Well, the law says you can choose not to include, but if you want to make it more favorable, you said, never mind, I want to pay my workers more. That's fine, right? If you've been paying all this while, that's fine. But if you've been paying and today you want to exclude it, now this may be tricky, right? Once you've been giving, it is already implied. So I would say continue giving it. But those of you all, if your company is starting for, is new, you're about to start paying OT. Now, if you want a legal way to reduce costs, one approach is don't include rest day and public holiday when you calculate OT. But again, always think of the broader picture. If you pay your employee less and less and less, why should they work for you? One of the biggest issue today we have is to recruit blue collar, to retain blue collar. Now, when we try to find creative ways to keep our costs low, now remember for the employees, why should I work for you if I can move on to another company and earn better, right? So that's something for you to think about. So when we look at ORP, right? So I've done a bit of comparison. So when we calculate wages, what are the components? So you'll notice everything is in except traveling allowance. However, when we look at ORP, work done on rest day, you don't have to include it. Public holiday, no. Approved incentive plan, you don't have to. And also traveling allowance. But allowances, commission, handphone, when I say allowances means any other allowance, except if it's a traveling allowance, right? Commission, handphone, transport, all this would need to be added in because these are considered as payments in cash for work done. And so some of you all may be asking this. When do I, that with the reduction of work hours, previously we worked 26 days times 8. Remember this, EA's design, or I always use this in my lecture. The standard design of EA, 6 days work, 7.5 hours per day. Previously was 6 days work, 8 hours per day. With the reduction of basic hours from 48 to 45, the average hours per day, if you're working 6 days, it's 7.5, right? So if employees of yours, if they're working all 6 days, 7.5, you follow 7.5. But if let's say your employees are working 5.5 days, the first 5 days, they are working 8 hours, and on Saturday, they're only working, let's say, 4 hours. So should you divide 8 or should you divide 7.5? Answer is you divide 8. And this is some illustration. I'm going to leave this to you because for me to explain, it'll take some time. But my advice to many of you all listening in today, when you draft your employment contract, we need to be very focused, very meticulous, and watch out, be cautious when we use the word paid, unpaid, because the word paid and unpaid has two different meanings. When we say the break is unpaid, that means you don't include it the work hours. But if we say the break is paid, that means you're paying for the break, right? So take note of this. Words like excluding and including, paid, unpaid. So be cautious when you draft letters. So the danger of relying on somebody else's contract, you copy and you paste, right? It's okay to copy and paste, but we must know what we're pasting, right? So I would urge you to review your contract today, whether you're using the word unpaid break or paid break, including, excluding. So these are some of the terminologies you got to use, right? And so let me just run through a little bit on the rate of pay. So normal day, right? If employee works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, normal days of work, the rate of pay, if they work beyond their normal hours, let's say the normal hours is 7.5. So if an employee works beyond 7.5, how do we pay? ORP times 1.5, right? Or we call it HRP times 1.5. And if the employee works on off day, the first 8 hours, or depending on your hours, right? If you're at 7.5, then it's 7.5, right? I'm using illustration of 8, assuming if employee works 8 hours, right? The first 8 hours is 1.5, the next 4 hours is 1.5. That means in an off day, it is flat 1.5. If it's on a rest day, the first 8 hours is 1.0 and the subsequent hours is 2.0. Public holiday is the first 8 hours 2.0 and the next 4 hours is 3.0. So the common question people ask is, why off day? They are not working. Why off day? Why should I pay 1.5 on an off day and not 1.0? Any one of you all have this question? Why should I pay 1.5 on a rest day and not 1.0? So if you have this question, I'll answer you. If not, I skip. Anyone? You're not sure. Sometimes your bosses may ask you, why should I pay 1.5 on an off day when they're not working? It's not a work day, right? So the best way to answer this, right? The best way to answer this is to look at the concept of off day, right? So remember this, standard design of EA is 6 days work. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Let's assume the week is Monday to Sunday, because some of your work week may be Thursday to Wednesday, so it doesn't matter. 7 days, it can start from Friday to Thursday. It doesn't. So here is an illustration of Monday to Sunday. So the first 6 days is work days, right? It's normal days. So when you work extra on normal days, it's 1.5. Sunday, clear cut, is a rest day. In this case, it's 1.0 and 2.0. But we decided that Saturday, we don't need you to work. So Saturday becomes an off day, not a rest day. There can only be one rest day in a week. So when we go back to section 59 on rest day, it says this, every employee shall be allowed in each week. That means a week means defined as 7 days, of one whole day, maybe determined from time to time, etc., etc. So if there's more than one rest day, the last day of the week shall be rest day. So that means Sunday remains a rest day, Saturday is an off day. But this Saturday is a part of a normal day, which now we are giving employees, rest. That is why Saturday remains at 1.5. So I hope with this, you're able to understand a little bit better. So the next time your boss asks you why Saturday 1.5, you show this table to them, right? You'll get a copy of this slide. You show this to them, boss. This is why Saturday we need to pay 1.5, right? I hope you're clear now. And next, what is the maximum overtime permitted? So the maximum OT, stated in regulations 1980 on employment limitation of overtime work. It says this: the maximum hours OT per month is 104 hours. But this 104, we do not include rest day, and we don't include public holiday. So that means if the employees work on rest day, public holiday, it can be beyond 104. But again, rest day, public holiday is not overtime. Overtime is only when you work on normal day after the normal hours. Rest day, we call it rest day pay. Public holiday, we call it public holiday pay. I know sometimes we call it as public holiday OT. Not the right word, but I mean, there's no issue if you call it public holiday OT, but we should call it public holiday pay and rest day pay. Overtime is only on normal days. So why 104? In a month, EA says there's 26 normal days. 30 days in a month, you minus 4 Sundays is 26. So 26 normal days times 4 hours per day, that is 104. So the 26 doesn't include public holiday, it doesn't include rest day. So that is why we arrive at 104. So my question to you all is, what if the design of your work process or your shift system requires an employee to work beyond 104, let's say 108, 112? Can or cannot? What say you all? Do you think you are able to ask your employees, compel them to work beyond 104 because the business operations requires so? Can we do that? Answer is yes, provided you get exemption from Labor Department. So there's a borang that you got to fill up, a permit and apply for exemption. If you're given, good for you. If not, the maximum is 104. So I just want to touch a little bit on who qualifies for overtime. So just now, I verbalized it. Now I'm going to show it to you. So we know that employees who earns wages up to 4,000, they qualify for overtime. But those who are earning above 4,000, they do not qualify. But we also need to look at the category of employees, right? So employee who's engaged in manual labor, your production operators, your F&B cashier, your the cook in the restaurant, the cleaner, your clerical staff. So all these employees, if they're earning below 4, automatically they qualify. But again here, manual workers, those who are operating or maintaining any mechanically propelled vehicle, or if they're supervising or overseeing other employees, this group, let's call it manual group, whether they are above 4 or below 4, they qualify for OT, irrespective of wages. But what about people who are working in the office? Your finance clerk, your HR clerk, your recruiter, your finance manager, your finance director, HR manager. Now this group, these people will fall under the category of other employees. So for those office workers, or sometimes we may call it white collar. So for this group of people, if they are not manual workers, right, but their salary is below 4, you still need to pay them overtime. But if their wages, right, wages is above 4, then OT is excluded. So the red box is for this group. So those of y'all who are HR managers, or maybe you're a senior HR exec, your salary is above 4, you fall in the red box because you're not manual workers. But your clerk, some of y'all, if you're a HR clerk, HR officer, maybe a HR supervisor, production supervisor, or production executive, fresh graduate, if your salary is below 4,000, overtime is applicable to you. So you fall under all other employees, the first box on the top, right? So this is how you read it. Now, the question, that is asked today, there's another question asked in forum. Can we cap wages to certain amount? So when we calculate overtime, the manual worker, I've got a lorry driver, right? He's a manual worker. His wages, total wages is 7,000 ringgit. Can I cap his overtime at 4,000? That means when I calculate OT, I'm going to calculate 4,000 divide 26, divide 7.5. Can I cap him at 4,000? Answer is no. You got to pay as per his actual wages. So if his wages is 7,000, it is 7,000 divide 26 divide 7.5. So you cannot cap. But what about, let's say I've got a production manager, or maybe I've got, let's say a sales manager. He needs to work long hours. And, of course, sales manager, production manager, if they're not managing people, not managing manual workers, they are not included. They fall under the red box. But you still want to pay them something. You want to compensate them. For this group, the group who's in the red box, if they're in the red box, this group, you can cap them. Or you can pay any other mechanism. Maybe you said, I just give you 1 day off. For this group, those people who fall in the red group, you can devise any other method. But those people in the green box, you have to follow the formula provided for in Employment Act. So can you cap? Yes, for those in the red box, but for those in the green box, you cannot cap. You got to pay them based on the actual wages. So I think many of you all know, 48 hours has become 45, so I'm going to skip this. I just wanted to share this in case you have any questions to ask. Now, we also know this formula, which was recently included in the recent amendment. How do we compute if an employee joined on 1st of October and resign or leaves the employment on 10th of October? What is the formula to use? Or they join on 10th October and they, on 31st October, when you calculate wages, what formula should you use? This is a formula which I think many of you are already familiar with. Now, another thing is time of pay. When do we pay wages, right? So there's 2 ways to look at. One is we must understand what is the definition of wage period. Now, your wage period, that means your period where you calculate your wage, for a period, it can be on calendar. I believe many of your salary is based on calendar. So for example, September, your salary is calculated from 1st till 30th. October will be 1st to 31st. But some of you all, especially at production work, right? You may calculate from 26th to 25th or 21st to 20. So it doesn't matter whether you use calendar or any other method. But a wage period is when from the beginning of that wage period until it expires, right? So it can be 1st to 30th or 26th to 25th the following month. So this illustration is based on calendar. So what it says here, wages. What is the definition of wages? Again, based on the earlier slide, basic wages and all other payments in cash. So wages has got to be paid within 7 days after the wage period is over. So for example, if you're following calendar basis, August wages has got to be paid by 7th of September. But rest day pay, public holiday pay, overtime pay, if you feel it's too short a time to calculate OT approval and so on, you can delay the payment, but you must pay before September wage expires, right? That means in the case of this example, by 30th September, you must pay rest day, public holiday, overtime. I know many of you're paying it together, which is good. It takes a bit of effort, to quickly rush everyone to approve and calculate. But I know some of you pay salary first, overtime you pay next month, right? That is fine as well. But some of what you may do, which you may want to check it out whether you're right or wrong. If you want to delay overtime, you are supposed to pay before the next month expires. So let's say last month was September. Overtime for September, we decided not to pay September because we need time to calculate. So when should you pay? Some of may be paying together with October pay on 7th of November, right? Correct, 7th of November. Now, you might have some issues there because what it says here, you can delay, but you must pay by end of September. So August overtime must be paid by 30th of September. You cannot pay on 7 October. Some of you all may take it on, to keep it simple, August overtime, you pay together with September basic, and you pay on October 7, which may not be acceptable. So please do check it out. And when should you pay wages? So there's 3 sections to look at. If it's payment on normal termination, you must pay, shall be paid. Again, this is from section 20, shall be paid not later than the day which the contract terminates. So the contract terminates today, you're supposed to pay today. Section 21.1 also says has got to be paid today. But section 21.2, this is a special bridge. It says that it has got to be paid no later than the 3rd day after the service is terminated. So I know some of us, what we may do, an employee resign on the 5th of September, we don't pay on the 15th, or on the 5th, sorry, we wait until September ends and only then we pay. Now, if you do that, you might be going against section, you may be in default with regards to section 20. Advances. Can I give an employee advance? Right? So what it says here, under section 22, no employer, that means you shouldn't be giving an employee advance, right, which exceeds the amount of wages that he may earn in the previous month, right, except for those items that you can see A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. So this one, I think you can read it, it's very easy to understand. Now, this is a common question, deduction, right? The common deduction we hear is, if employee come late to work hour starts at 8 o'clock, but the employee only appeared at the doorstep at 8:30. So the half an hour he was late, I'm going to deduct his salary. Well, legally there's nothing wrong, but the word deduction is not the right word, right? So the best way to describe this is, you're not paying for hours not worked. So the half an hour he did not work, therefore I'm not paying for the half an hour. So if if one day's work hours is 8, on that day he only works 7.5, so you only pay 7.5, you don't pay 8. But we call it deduction, right? It's a small terminology issue, but I don't see a big issue there. So what kind of deduction is allowed? So I've put in 3 categories, and this is from Employment Act section 24. So what is allowed? That means you don't need any permission, you don't need employee to give you consent. If you have made any overpayment of wages, right, in the last 3 months, you can deduct. Or if the employee need to give you notice, he wants to resign, but he failed to give you notice, you can also deduct from his salary. Or if any advance wages, you have given him advance and you want to recover back the advance, that is also possible, but there's some conditions there, you may want to read it. And if there's any other deductions authorized by the law, for example, EPF, income tax, per queso, right? These are the things you can also deduct without any permission. Now, the next item is, you can deduct at the request of the employee. For example, if your organization has got a trade union, right? This, employee give a consent and you can deduct. But the third box is, all this you can only deduct, even though employee requests, but you can only deduct after obtaining permission from the Labour Director General, item A, B, C, D, E, F. So the last box, even though employee give you a letter, said, dear boss, you can deduct my salary for this item, that is not good enough. You still need to obtain permission from Director General of Labour Department. And again, lawful deduction says what? When we are going to deduct an employee's wages, it shall not exceed 50% of his wages. So let's say the total wages of the employee is 3,500. If you want to perform any deduction, it cannot exceed 50%, right? More than 50%. But this doesn't apply. So if, let's say, the employee need to pay you his notice period, you can deduct his entire salary. Or if there's any final payment of wages and he owes you some money, you can deduct. But other than this, the max deduction allowed is 50%. So this comes from section 24.8. And calculation of wages, ORP, annual leave, unpaid leave. So what formula do I use? If I want to calculate incomplete month pay, the employee either joined halfway or left halfway in that particular month, So salary, wages, divide calendar. Or if the employee apply unpaid leave. So this month, the employee has taken 5 days unpaid leave. So what formula do we use? 5 divided calendar days times the wages. However, for ORP, we divide 26. For annual leave, we divide 26. So my question to you all is, why annual leave divide 26? Why not divide 30? Why not divide the calendar month? Why should we deduct 26? Why should we use 26 when we deduct, when we want to calculate, when we calculate annual leave and encashment? Because employees don't apply annual leave on rest day. So in a month, the standard definition is 30 days, four rest days. That means 4 Sundays or 4 rest days. So people do not apply annual leave on the 4 rest days. So therefore, you divide 26. And for those of you who are new, another thing to also take note of is casual employment, part-time employment, full-time employment. So casual employment are those employees who are earning up to 13.5 hours, or shall I say, those employees who's working less than 30% of a full-time job, full-time hours, they are casual, or those home working, they are not included. But part-timers are those who work between 30% up to 70% of a full-time employment hours, which is 45. So which roughly works out to 13.5 and up to 31.5. But on the left-hand side, full-time means as long as they work more than 70% of full-time hours, their total hours will be 31.5 or more, right? So the reason of me showing you this is just to get you to know that pay attention to the overtime. If they're working overtime, what will be the overtime pay? And if they're working a public holiday, what will be the public holiday rate for full-time and also part-time, right? There's a slight difference there. And if they're working on a rest day, what will be the pay for rest day, right? So you'll have this slide, go through it quite straightforward. Now, if you are calculating using a payroll system, right? If you're paying an employee using payroll system for part-timers, you may want to ask your vendor whether your payroll system is tweaked to capture part-time employment. If you have them. If you don't have part-time employees, that's fine. But if you have, and if you're using your payroll system, do check whether the rate of pay for overtime, public holiday, is follows what has been defined by the law. Okay, so now that's very much on the presentation for today. So I'm going to answer your questions, but before that, a small advertisement. Remember, I say wait till the end. Now, those of you all who are new, and if you want to really learn deeply into all these topics, especially if you are managing operations, payroll, IR, etc., we would encourage you to join our Employment Law and Industrial Relations Masterclass. So our next dates are October in Penang, KL, Kuantan, and also November in Johor. And what do you learn in these 2 days is a Power Pack program. I believe many of you all have joined this program. So you learn the fundamentals of EAIR. How do you set up PIP? How do you terminate a probationer safely if they're not performing? Employees with medical conditions, how do you terminate them? What are the shortcuts, right? What are the shortcuts to managing disciplinary issues? For example, some of you all, when you issue show cause letter, if an employee is late to work, absent to work, you issue show cause, wait for reply, and this process may take few days, 1 week. Now we can do it in half an hour. How do we do it in half an hour without breaking the law? So these are all some ideas. How do we design a performance management system? What are the amendments made to the employment law? And you get policy templates, handbooks. How do we reduce firefighting? How do we prevent fires? Many a times when we have issues, we want to learn how to better manage issues. But in this class, you will learn how to prevent the issues, how to avoid the issues happening. So prevention is better than cure. Cure is expensive, painful, takes time. Prevention takes a lot of effort at the beginning, but at the later stage, you'll find life is so easy because you have prevented all these issues and you can focus on the bigger things. So as HR, we got to ask ourselves, do we want to focus on running after operators, who's in, who's out, who's coming in late, issue letters, deduct here, there, etc.? Or you want to minimize all of this and focus on competency development, succession planning, employees' career progression. So which one do we want to focus on? Continue firefighting, who's in, who's out, pay here, warning letter, issue letter, show cause letter here, or minimize this by working on your fundamentals. That's why, point 1 is strengthen your fundamentals, avoid these issues. every issue that happens in the workplace, in most cases, is created by company. Why are employees demotivated? Because we did not pay them well. Why are they demotivated? Because we never bothered to check why is this employee in the same job grade for the last 5 years. They get demotivated because for the last 5 years, manager in, out, same job grade. Employee become demotivated. You will feel demotivated as well. So when HR looks at them, this employee demotivated. Kerja cukup makan. Don't want to work hard. Why? Because nobody looked at his career progression. Right? So we'll cover all of this in the masterclass. So the regular rate is about 2006, HRDF rate for 2 days, 1,003 times 2 days. But in the next half an hour, there's a link that's shared by my team. The next half an hour only, if you sign up, 15% discount, you pay 2210. And you will get a copy of the employee handbook template, soft copy, editable. You take, within a day or two, you'll get your handbook up. Of course, you got to see whether, everything is there. And also the DI guidebook. So you get this for free, and over 80 documentations, soft copy, editable version will be given to you as well, by joining this class. So it's worth more than 26, but we're offering to you at 2210 if you sign up in the next half an hour. After half an hour, you pay full price. So I can have a bigger meal in a 5-star restaurant. Okay, so that's very much on the sharing today. So I'm going to answer questions. I know there's a lot of questions. So let me pick. I may not answer all. Some of it I've already answered, but let me pick some of those that I've not answered or something that is quite unique or peculiar. Right. So let me just scroll through. Okay. So Anis asked this question: how about OT for September paid on October salary? That means September overtime, we pay together with October salary. Yes, you can, but the overtime must be paid before October ends, right? That means by 31st October, the September OT has got to be paid. But what some of you all may be doing is to pay by 7th of November, which is wrong. Because last month's OT has got to be paid latest by this month. So when we pay October salary next month on the 7th, for OT, last month's OT has got to be paid this month, not next month 7, right? So Atira, you might want to check it out. What if OT form submitted late by the staff and accumulated a few months, only beginning HR? Well, I think this is a procedural issue, a process flow issue. You might want to see how to overcome this. My question to you is, why should staff submit? I mean, for me, it is a company who asks the employee to stay back, right? Can you stay back today because we have some extra work to do? So I think for the question put up by Azira, you should review your internal process. I don't think it's fair to put this burden on the employee. If I'm the employee, you want me to work, I've done my job. Why should I go around begging for my salary? So I would say improvise your internal procedure, the process to get your OT approved. Cheryl, up to 4,000 or above 4,000 overtime. Answer is up to 4,000. So if the employee's wages, which is basic salary and all other payments in cash, whether it's 2005, 2008, 3003, 3007, 3999, 4000, they are eligible for overtime. Anything above 400, that means 400, 1, 2, 3, 4,200, 300, they are not eligible for overtime if they are not manual workers. So remember this, manual workers, for example, your lorry drivers, even if they earn 7,000, they are eligible for overtime. But for those who are non-manual workers, non-supervisors, OT payable for those earning up to 4,000 ringgit. Okay, so there's a question here. Confusion in your slide. You stated first 8 hours is 1.5. Shouldn't it be normal rate times 1 for the first 8 hours on off day? Answer is no. So that is why you got to understand the off day concept. Off day is not rest day, right? So this is by, okay, it's very difficult to pronounce the name, Chetno Sari, right? You got to understand the concept of off day. Off day is not rest day. Rest day is not off day. So off day, it is a normal work day as well, but you gave employees off. Whereas a rest day is something mandatory by the law. So I would urge you to revisit a slide on the concept of off day, rest day. This question of yours will be answered there. Okay, for shift worker, there's no clause in EA that states cannot work more than 8 hours per day. Therefore, can we calculate, let me see, therefore, can we calculate the shift workers overtime after they work for 45 hours? Now, that is why we must go back to the provision on Employment Act. Let me show you here. So, 𝙎𝙊𝘾𝙄𝘼𝙇𝙎, your answer is here. If you look at hours of work, right, look at the amended section. You look at item number, B, 1B. Cannot work more than 8 hours in one day, right? So it is already provided for there. So the contract of service is considered to have been terminated on the last day of notice or a day immediately after the notice. So if, let's say, the employee resign and serves his notice, and let's say the notice period is from 15 August to 15 September. So his last day of employment is 15 September. By law, he's going to be paid by on 15 of September. So I have an admin executive, office staff, who's getting a salary of 3,000 ringgit per month. If she is requested by her superior to come and work on Saturday, which is an off day, do we need to give replacement leave or pay OT? Now, this Fiona, it's quite straightforward. This employee of yours falls under the OT, the public holiday pay, the rest day pay bracket. So if you ask them to come on their off day, she would be entitled to whatever number of hours times 1.5, right? Can you give replacement leave? Not for her category, because the law only says that people like her, if she comes, she's got to be paid 1.5, right? Anyway, the value of replacement leave and 1.5 is higher, right? Replacement leave is not high. Okay, Catherine, I would like to ask this. If calculate for intern OT, do we divide calendar days or divide 26? Now, firstly, internship, they do not fall under Employment Act, right? Interns are not employees because you have not given them a contract of service. So you do not need to follow the formula provided by Employment Act. But you want to follow, that's fine. But it is not mandatory to follow because interns are not employees. But if you still want to pay, you can use any formula. But if you wish to use the same formula that you pay your full-time employees, your permanent employees, those who are eligible for OT, then it is divide 26. You can also divide 22, 29, you can use any denominator below 26. For example, some people always tell me this, we only work 5 days. Can I divide 22? You can. When you divide 22, it is more favorable. Now, if you have a paper with you, you divide, let's say we take 3,000 divide 26. What is the formula? What is the output? If we divide 22, what is the output? If we divide 18, when the denominator is lower, the output is higher. So you can use any other formula. If the formula is more favorable, the law is silent. Good. I mean, the law says good. You can pay more, but you cannot pay less. Right? For those of you all who are using the 22, any denominator below 26, that's fine. You're not wrong. In fact, you're making it more favorable, which is good. But once you start giving, it becomes implied. Now, Rachel has this question. If a person is assigned to work 18 days as a project-based executive, are they considered part-time or freelance? Well, if they are working 18 days, that is more than 30%. So they are either full-time or part-time. I think chances are this person will be a full-time employee, right? So I think they are full-time employees. So payment should include statutory. Whether you are part-time or full-time, part-timers and full-timers, they are both employees. Statutory payment applies to them, whether it's EPF, income tax, per case, so all this applies to them. But for freelance, or shall I say those casual employees, they are not employees, so therefore statutory is not applicable to them. Tax would be a different story. Okay, this is a very interesting question. I'll try my best to answer this, Athena. For shift workers, can the employer give advance rest day? That means second week rest day is given in the first week, and the second day work week is more than 50 hours without rest day. Now, so the best person to answer this question, Athena, would be Labour Department. If for some reason, if you're not able to follow the standard, prescription by Employment Act, because of the nature of the business, you need to speak to Labour Department and see whether they can give you an exemption, right? These are all unique scenarios. Talk to Labour and explain to them your scenario and see whether they can give you an exemption to apply for this, to apply this concept. So, of course, if you follow employment, answer is no, right? Now, Zalika has this question. If OT cutoff is 26th of May to 25th of June, that means her cutoff for OT, 26th to 25th. And the salary paid in June salary, as long as you pay before, before the end of next wage period. So in the case of Zalika, your wage period is 26th to 25th. So last month's wages, overtime, you must pay by the 25th of the following month, not after that. So can employer pay OT by flat rate? Now this is a little bit tricky to answer. Employment Act has already given you a formula how to calculate overtime. Wages, divide 26 and divide 7.5 or 8, depending on your work hours. Now, if you want to pay a flat rate, firstly, you got to determine what is the flat rate. Now, if the flat rate, the value of the flat rate is lesser than the formula, I don't think is right. But if the value of the flat rate is much more than the formula, that means it's more favorable. Let's say if you follow the formula, the output is OT output, let's say it's 200 ringgit, for example, but your flat rate is 210. That's okay because it's more favorable. So remember, EA also says this, you can use any other formula, but it cannot be less favorable, or the formula cannot be less favorable than what is provided for in Employment Act. So if you want to use a flat rate, make sure that the flat rate is higher than the OT rate. So now my question to you is, why pusing? If law already given a formula, just follow a formula. If you want to follow flat rate, you got to always calculate and always check back against the formula whether your flat rate is higher or lesser. If lesser, cannot. Higher, no problem. So why double job? Why not just pay based on the OT formula? Why we complicate things, right? Most payroll system today is already tweaked to calculate for you, right? Now, El Farida has another question. Is there any difference in overtime entitlement or rules between normal hours staff and shift work staff? I don't quite get your question here, but to me, the OT provision applies to all employees, whether they are normal hours or shift, as long as they work more than the normal hours of work, right? For example, if I hear you correctly, I'm an office staff. My work hours finishes at 5:30. My basic hours finish at 5:30. If I work beyond 5:30, I will be eligible for overtime if I fall under the OT bracket. For shift employees, they will complete the normal hours first. Let's say the shift is from 7 a.m., right, to the next day, 7 p.m. to the next day, 7 a.m. So if their work definition starts at 7 p.m., then the OT is paid at a later stage. So I know some companies that have this OT that starts earlier or later. So your OT is only when you work beyond your normal hours of work in a single day, right? A day is defined as 24 hours. Now in 24 hours, the max basic hours is 7.5. If you work more than 7.5 on that particular day, OT is applicable. So Mei Ching has this question on off day, rest day. How do we differentiate off day and rest day if there are only 5 working days per week? Saturday and Sunday must be off day, rest day respectively, or both are rest day. So answer is very simple. There's only one rest day, which is the last day. The day before that, it's an off day. So for example, if you are practicing Mondays to Sundays and you only work 5 days, so Sunday is your rest day, Saturday is an off day. Now, �12𝙊𝘾𝙄𝘼𝙇𝙎, how do I calculate production staff, right? They work on public holiday, but that falls on the rest day. Now remember, if the public holiday falls on a rest day, they work on the day as a rest day. It's normal day for them, right? Public holiday, you replace with another day. So they still get their rest day pay and they get their public holiday pay at a later date. So that is why if the public holiday falls on a rest day on a Sunday, for example, Monday becomes a public holiday replacement. So Sunday, they are paid. If they work on Sunday, they get, the first hours is 1.0 and subsequently 2.0. Monday is their replacement public holiday. And if they work, they get 2.0 and 3.0, right? So even though it falls on Sunday, Sunday will still be the rest day. Monday will be the replacement public holiday. Okay, Jermaine, for factory production workers, can give subsistence allowance when no overtime only, non-peak season. But when you have peak season, then there's no subsistence allowance. Well, Jermaine, sometimes I'm a little bit harsh in my statement. I think you're just circumventing it, trying to find ways to cut costs. Now, subsistence allowance is given when they've incurred special expenses. Now, these production workers, they've not incurred anything. So the reason I think why you're asking this is you want to reduce overtime, which is not right. The law says this: if they work more than their normal hours of work, OT has got to be paid, right? So if you want to if you do not want to pay OT and you want to change your subsidy allowance, I don't think it's right, right? I would urge you to seek guidance from Labour Department whether this is proper or not, right? But I think you're just finding illegal methods to reduce costs for the company. Remember this: if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So sometimes I always wonder, why do employers crack their head so much? Try to save this much. You crack your head, work so hard, finding ways here, there, checking WhatsApp, checking Facebook, checking here, there, etc., just to save this cost. That effort, energy, stress, right, that you put in, if you were to put that same effort, energy, and that effort, energy, time on something more productive, what the company would gain is far greater than what you're trying to save here. So this is what I call as costly saving, right? This is what I call as costly saving. Penny wise, pound foolish, right? So if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So Jermaine, I would tell you, I would advise you, put this aside. Don't look at this, right? Do things, logically and legally. Okay, Hani, contract for service and contract of service. Can employee choose not to contribute statutory for contract for service? Of course. Now, all of you all are, if you're employees, right? All employees, you've got an employment contract. Employment contract is contract of service. So if you have a contract of service, EPF, all those things are applicable. But if you hire a freelancer, a contractor, and they're not employee, etc., that is called contract for service. So a contractor that you engage, that is called contract for service. Contract for service, EPF, and all those things are not applicable. You pay them whatever service fee that they ask for, you pay them. How they manage their internal stuff, that's their problem, not yours, right? So you only pay statutory contribution for contract of service. So Rachel, casual labor, count weekly basis. Can part-time also count and pay by weekly basis? Now remember this, whether they are part-time or full-time, they are employees. Now EA says this, you can pay employees, on monthly basis or monthly method, weekly method, daily method, hourly method, piece rated, task-based, trip, tonnage, commission-based. There's many methods, right? There's many methods that you can apply. So it's really up to you. For casual labor, they are not employees, right? They work for 2-3 hours, less than 30%. They are not employees. How you pay them? Whatever you agree with them, you pay them, right? But for those who fall under part-time and full-time, they are governed by Employment Act. So Rachel, maybe I can also offer this idea to you. So one of my client has this scenario. They run F&B outlet. That means they are restaurant, they run F&B outlet. And they always have this dilemma, sometimes above 30%, sometimes below 30%. How do I manage? I cannot be, checking every month. So I told them this. What you could do is just consider everybody full-time. The only thing you lose out here is annual leave, casual workers are lesser, full-time employees are more. So one option is you consider them as full-time employees, but you only pay for the hours they work. So for example, if in a day, 7.5 hours, they only work 4 hours, your system will automatically only pay for 4 and not the balance 3.5, right? So one way to overcome this is consider everybody full-time. Your payroll system will pay for the hours they come. If they don't come, they don't get paid, right? It will be unpaid leave. But the only thing that you lose out, the company will lose out, is you may give them additional annual leave, but it's not many days as well. So this would be one easy method to manage. For those of you all, if you're using high volume of casual employees, sometimes the number of hours they work exceeds 30%, sometimes below, right? You cannot be changing their employment status every time they exceed their employees. they go below their casual workers, right? So, okay. So now, Penny, can the company hire restaurant manager with basic 4.1 but require 10 hours per day without OT? Now, first and foremost, I believe restaurant managers are not manual workers. Therefore, the overtime provision doesn't apply to them. But asking an employee to work more than 10 hours, now we always must remember this, the work hours per week is 45. So if in a particular day you ask them to work more than 10, right, get a written consent from this employee. I think he is not entitled. Restaurant manager are not manual workers, right? If you and him agree that you work more than 10 hours in this particular day, but please do not exceed 12 hours in a day. So Nurliana, if companies already said no overtime, no overtime paid to staff in the offer letter, can they entitled to get OT if their wages below 4K? Very simple. Even though in your offer letter you state very clearly, terang-terang, no OT. But if you ask them to work OT, surely you got to pay OT. So sometimes company find some creative ways. They will tell the employee, no OT, but they'll ask them to work OT. And then they said, okay, as per contract, I don't need to pay you because I say no OT. Answer is no. If you ask them to work and they work, even if your contract is silent or your contract says no OT, you're already breaking the law. The law says for employees earning below 4K, right? Or if they're manual workers, if they work beyond their normal hours of work, OT is payable. So remember this, if your employment contract terms is not in line with the law takes precedent, not your contract. Sorry, if when you don't provide annual leave, what happens? The employee will apply for sick leave. For some employees, sick leave is cuti tahunan tambahan because you don't give annual leave. So what they do, they take sick leave. After 3 months, they decide to resign. You'll end up paying back the annual leave. So what you have done is, because you did not give annual leave, some of them may have taken sick leave. You have paid for the sick leave. The clinic, you pay 60 ringgit. For the salary, you pay another 60. Then after 3 months, they decide to go, you pay them for another 2-3 days, depending on your annual leave entitlement. So why double cost? Now, for Rachel, I would like to ask you this question. If your company is not providing annual leave during probation, don't you think that they are also human beings? They also got their personal affairs. They may be married. They may have kids. Why do we want to deprive them of the annual leave? How much are you trying to save? By not giving annual leave, how much are you saving? Companies who practice this, do a bit of homework, do a bit of calculation, go and check your MC records. See your probationers. How many days of MC they've taken? Why are they taking so many MCs? Are they genuinely sick, or they apply MC because they need to do something, and because you fail to give them annual leave, therefore they apply for MC, right? If that happens in your company, you're wasting time, you're wasting money. This is what I call as a costly saving. Penny wise, pound foolish, right? We think we're saving money for the company, but in actual fact, we are burning money, we are wasting money. So I would say, please have a look at it, see whether it makes sense to have this practice. So Tila, how do we calculate salary for resignee, a staff who resign? Basic salary divide calendar days times by number of working days in a month. Very simple. Let's say an employee resign and the last day is 10th of October. So how do we calculate? 10 divide 31. Because this month we have 31 days, right? So to calculate salary for the month is 10 days since he worked until the 10th of October. So 10 divide 31 times the wages. Then you get an output. Okay, so this is a very interesting question. I think we did answer this in the forum. Employee absent 1 day, or maybe before or maybe after the public holiday. He was absent, right? But public holiday he came. Employment Act says this, if an employee absent to work either 1 day before public holiday or the day after public holiday, then he will not enjoy the public holiday pay, right? Now, all of us, when we are paid on a monthly basis, we are paid for every day of the month. Saturday we are paid for, Sunday we are paid for. If the holiday falls on, let's say, Wednesday, we can stay at home. We are also paid for the day, right? We are paid for the day. But if the employee did not come to work on Tuesday or Thursday, Wednesday public holiday, Tuesday the employee absent or Thursday absent, then the public holiday pay he is not eligible. But if he works overtime, he comes on the day, sorry, not overtime. When the employee works on the day, he would be eligible for the public holiday pay for the work done. So remember this. Let's say now, Wednesday is public holiday, and I still come to work. I'm already paid that for the day. So for every hour of work, I'm paid, times 2 and times 4. So times 2, times 3, I'm paid. So he will not get the basic salary for the day, but he'll get the public holiday pay for the day. That times 2 and times 3, he'll get paid. Ideal. Now this is a very unique question. So let's say if the overtime exceeds 104, can we pay the extra? Let's say, for example, the overtime is 104, but in his case, the overtime is 108, for example. So 104, they pay before the next month expires, right? Next wage period expires. That's what the law says. But the additional 4 hours, can I pay the following month? So ideally, I got two ways to answer. Two parts to my answer. One, why complicate the process? Why do double calculation? You're going to confuse and make your whole payroll system messy. How's your payroll system going to tweak? Right? I don't think a payroll system can do that. If your payroll system can break OT into 2 parts, 104 and above, I think you have a fantastic payroll system. Let us know. Maybe we can also use it. Right? Why complicate the process? How are you going to put a pay slip? Right? That's number one. Number two, the law clearly says that OT must be paid by the next wage period. Whether you exceed or not, it's got to be paid. And the third part of my answer to you is, how can you exceed? Did you get approval from labor to exceed 104? If not, please revise your work hours. You're not supposed to exceed 104 without labor's approval. Okay, so Jermaine, we are paying OT as usual, but there are non-peak season when sales is low. Okay, I think you're providing an answer to that. So to me, those of you all, and this is the method, do your research. If you've got casual employees and sometimes they work more than 30 hours, less than 30 hours, how do you manage this? One approach taken by one of my clients is they consider them as full-time employees. So if you work, I pay you full. If let's say on the day they come 8 hours, the system will pick up full 8 hours. But the next day they do not come to work, the system will consider they are absent. So will not pay them for the day. The only thing in this method is you lose out on annual leave. Right? Annual leave for part-timers is 7 days. If I'm not mistaken, full-time is 11 days. So here, I'm going to consider it's 11 days and not 7. So to me, that 4 days is not a big deal, right? So sometimes, for me as a HR practitioner, I always advise, and I'm going to advise you as well, look at the bigger picture and not the smaller picture. So when I say look at the bigger picture, what you want is, you want this part-timer, let's say now I've got a scenario, I've got casual workers. Sometimes they work more than 30, sometimes less than 30. So how do I manage this? I do not want to burden the payroll team to calculate, etc., just because to save that 4 days, 3 days of public holiday. I rather consider everybody as employees, full-time, but I'll tell them the system will pick up when you come to work, it pays you in full or pay you for the hours work. When you don't work full, the system will consider absent, right? But they'll enjoy the full-time employees' entitlement. Remember, most of you, if I come and visit your company, I'm sure if I open an employee handbook or your company charter, you'll say that, it'll be stated, people are our assets. So treat them as your assets, not a liability. So, okay, I've been asked to repeat this. Sunday is a public holiday, Monday is replacement PH. So the OT calculation for Sunday, okay, again, it's not OT, it's more of public as Sunday pay. If employee works on a rest day and Sunday is a rest day, a public holiday falls on Sunday. So on Sunday, it'll be still treated as a rest day if the employee works the first, the basic hours is 1.0, and after basic hours, you times 2.0. Monday would become a replacement public holiday. If they work, then you got to pay them the public holiday pay. If they don't work, they still enjoy their public holiday because they already paid the basic salary for the day. Yeah, Kenneth, thanks for saying this. If your company policy of your employment terms is not in line with the law, you got to follow the law. Sometimes we become very creative. We try to manipulate, terms of employment to make it, and it's less favorable. The law says this, anything that is less favorable than Employment Act, we have to follow Employment Act. But if your employment terms is more favorable Employment Act, you follow your employment contract. So yeah, thanks, Kenneth, for reminding us on that. Okay, if the part-timer is 60 years old, is he still under Employment Act? Now, Employment Act did not say, go back to first schedule. In the first schedule, you'll never find anywhere in the first schedule that says Employment Act is for those employees 60 years old and below. Employment Act is for anyone with a contract of service, right? So if you hire somebody at the age of 61, 62, and you give him a contract of service, he is an employee, he is covered under Employment Act. Okay, now this is good. Aryoka, if employee requests their salary to, to bank in to use personal enterprise account. Now, I'm not sure what is a personal enterprise account, but Employment Act clearly says that salary has got to be paid into financial institution. Prior to the amendment is bank, but we know the financial industry has progressed so much. So now it says financial institution. So that means when employee has earned their salary, it's got to be paid into a financial institution. If the employee write to you, give you a letter saying that, dear boss, can you pay me my salary in cash or check, or maybe can you pay to my friend's account? You need to get permission from labor to pay in cash or check or any other method. By law, default, you got to bank into the account. But if you want to follow any other method, cash, check, etc., please get permission from labor. Now, I would advise you not to complicate things. Stick to basic. If the law says, if basic bank account, why do we want to entertain paying into other account, right? This effort, if you ask me, it is not necessary. If you want to keep your employees happy, sometimes, we say that, no, I want to keep my employees happy. Why not you make them happy through other methods? Pay them competitively, grow them in their career, train them, encourage them, motivate them. Why must he be paying into an enterprise account, right? So we as HR, as an employer, I always advise myself, remind myself, as an employer, and I would also encourage you to, think the same. What are your priorities? Is your priority to waste time, here and there, or do what is right, do what is in accordance with the law? If a public holiday falls on a rest day, right, you must replace another day, because rest day is something employees are entitled for. So as an employee, today, Sunday is my rest day, is my entitlement. So if a public holiday falls, company must replace this public holiday the next working day or any other day, provided we agree on it. So if public holiday falls today, it's my rest day, my entitlement. Tomorrow becomes the replacement public holiday. I can choose to come to work, or I can choose to stay home and enjoy my public holiday. So it is not forfeited, right? Okay, Ironat, is there any law that says company can hold last salary? Staff left company according to all SOPs, income tax done, clearance done, but company failed to make payment. Now remember this, if the employee, if that wage earned after you minus notice period, or if there's any owing to company, you've already deducted, and this is going to be lawful deduction. If there's a balance, it has got to be paid to the worker, to the employee, right? Now, we are not supposed to hold any salary, of worker salary. If we hold any money that is not due to you, by end of the year, this money will become as undeclared money, right? Now, undeclared money has got to be paid to, unclaimed money. It has got to be paid to the Unclaimed Money Act. So those of you who are listening today, if you are holding employee salary, right, this money is not yours. This is considered as unclaimed money, and end of the year, you got to make a declaration to Unclaimed Money Act, and this money has got to be channeled to them, not for you to keep. So remember this, if you are holding an employee salary, of course, after tax clearance done, if the employee don't owe you, notice period all done, etc., if there's a balance, you got to pay to the employee. Of course, the employee can walk to labor and inform labor that my company did not pay me my last wages. Labor might call you, right? But let's say, employee don't take up a case and labor don't call you, you might be breaking the Unclaimed Money Act. So please check out what is Unclaimed Money Act. A copy is also in the forum, Unclaimed Money Act. It says that any salary that is not, worker salary, which you do not pay, you hold it. At the end of the year, it becomes unclaimed money. Let me see. So we are almost done. Maybe I just pick one or two last questions, then we're done. It's already 4:35. Let me see if I any interesting question, right? Okay, Nora Shikin, a bankrupt seller, the employee is bankrupt. Can we pay his salary into the wife's account? Now, firstly, the law says that it must be paid to the employee's account. Even a bankruptcy, right? A bankruptcy, you can still pay to his account. A bankruptcy will need to go to the insolvency department, get a letter for him to have a bank account for the purpose of crediting his salary. I would not. I would advise you, Norashiki and Nur Shirin, not to entertain him. You tell him, go to the insolvency department. We want to help you. Go to insolvency department, get a letter for you to allow you to hold a bank account for the purpose of crediting his salary. So do not entertain him to pay into his wife's account. Don't get in trouble. Okay, so let me see if there's any other interesting ones, sir. Okay, Jesse, yeah, thanks for reminding us. IRB allows you to hold a salary, pending clearance from IRB, right? Once IRB cleared, you got to pay the employees. Okay, let me just one last question. Let's see if there's anything interesting. Okay, so Leong Suk Fan, if operation workers attend training on off day, we pay them off day pay. You see, training is part of work. Training is not part of their leisure. You want to train them because you want them to be good at something. You want them to learn a particular skill or a particular process. You ask them to come on their off day to go through classes. Training is part of work. So therefore, for this case, you have to pay them their off day rate. Sometimes we think that, training is a benefit, it benefits you, I don't want to pay. But as for me, my view is training is part of work. When you ask them to come for training, it is part of their job, part of their work, right? Okay, so I think I will just end here. But I welcome all of you all to raise some of these questions in the Malaysia HR forum, and I'm sure sometimes I do answer, but I know there are many helpful colleagues, many experienced practitioners. They provide, they also will reply to some of your questions. So please make the best use of